Okay, here's a video on naming your movie files to get a more successful hit ratio with BMT. Oddly enough, it really doesn't begin with BMT itself. It involves the naming of the files, for example, like 2012. Naming the actual file. That's what's most important because that's what BMT will use to scrape against. Let me just talk a little bit about how BMT scrapes information. It uses two sources, IMDb and TMDb. Basically, with this particular profile, we'll see that it's made up of a couple of different things. And I'm going to boil this down to the very simplest essence. There's a lot more going on with the scraping than what I'm going to describe. But if you'll notice here, all of these are the metadata fields. Well, they're brought in two steps. First, by default, BMT is set to scan IMDb, and then after it's done scanning IMDb, it will scan TMDb. It scans IMDb first because IMDb has a more forgiving matching on the naming. And that's important to us because of what I'm going to go over here. So basically, this one I can tell you that this was brought in by IMDb, and then any of the graphic elements, the posters, the backgrounds, and the banners, those were brought in by TMDb. And we can verify and check against this because 50 odd years after Ellen Ripley survived her disastrous ordeal, blah, blah, blah. If I go to find metadata, it defaults to the TMDb. And if I just search this, I say, yeah, that's the one I want. Notice that this changed when Ripley's life pod is found and salvaged, blah, blah, blah. It's different than what was there before. There's two standards, and I chose the TMDB standard for that manual search than when it auto searched originally, which was the IMDb standard, which is fine. And we can change that if we want. We can go into configure and go into Phoenix and go down to the fan art and metadata options. And we can look at who the metadata providers are for movies. Obviously, TV is different. TV uses the TVDB, and the movies are going to, by default, be IMDb and then go to TMDB. You can also add in here DVD Profiler if you're using DVD Profiler. I don't use that, so I just stick with this standard. The real difference and significance of this is how it's working, is that this one scans first, gathers basically all of the text fields, all of the descriptions and whatnot, because it's an easier match by title and it's more forgiving. And then it's passed to the TMDB for collection of the artwork. And we can change that to just TMDB only if we want, but then we're giving up that flexibility of the naming convention. Because we want to strive to have our physical naming of our files be to the more exacting standard of TMDB, because IMDb will gather it regardless. If we jump into the TMDB database, I'll show you a couple of examples of why it's important to have a very specific naming convention for your files. The A team. That's probably how a lot of people would name their files for the A team. I don't have it here, but obviously that's probably what people would do. I'm going to enter that. And I get a hit. Looks like I got a good hit. I mean, A team came to the top. But then you'll notice that there's a bunch of other entries in this search. Team America, World Police. My point is, it really wasn't a direct hit. It wasn't a 100% match. So I'm going to alter that. A team. Still looks good, right? I get nearly the same results. Maybe I got a few fewer hits than I did before. What we want to do is make sure that we name and look for files exactly how TMDB looks at it. The A-team. A-team. And you'll notice we jump directly into this detailed profile view. That's what we want. If we always go to the movie database first when we're adding our movies and getting these direct hits, we can just copy and paste this entire name with the inclusion of the parentheses and the year, and paste that as our file names. And the reason it's very specific and important is because TMDB is very stringent. You'll notice, you remember we had a space there and it didn't pick it up directly. It was looking for that dash. So that's why we want to make sure we have that. But the year is also very important for movies like Alice in Wonderland. Look at this, Alice in Wonderland. Look at how many times it's replicated throughout the years. If you just have Alice in Wonderland as the name of your movie, BMT will fail to bring back the one that you specifically want without the inclusion of the year. If I put the year in there and I copy and paste that over here and run that, I go directly to the detailed profile. That's what we want. Here's an example of a search and why it's important to be very, very accurate in your naming. Planes, trains, ampersand, automobiles. No results were found with planes, trains, and automobiles. Well, that's quite interesting. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to take a look at what the IMDb database has for planes, trains, and automobiles. Well, look at that. IMDb populated that right off the bat, and they have an ampersand in there. I jump back over to TMDB, and I'll paste this back in here. And I'll show you the importance of this is that even if it's a character off, it can fail. I exchange the ampersand for an and, I get a hit. This is the standard that I'm going to want because I can be sure that if I drop this into IMDb, because it's more forgiving, I'll still get a hit because it will find it and no problem. So if we adhere to this standard of whatever the TMDB has, we're likely to get more of a hit ratio than any other way. And it's important to do this up front and with every movie. Now going backwards, you have to make that decision. Do you want to go back and rename all your movies? Some people will, some people won't. It's a good idea to do it, but understandably, most people won't. But moving forward, there is no reason not to adhere to a naming convention standard such as this. This is exactly how BMT will parse the naming, the file that you have for your movie. This is the movie title, year in parentheses, then anything after the dash is optional text. You can put whatever you want in there. Your information or your cues or whatever you want to help you identify it. You want this to be adhered to the TMDB standard. That's what you want, is this to be this, and you will have far greater hit ratio than if you don't. I hope you found this helpful, and good luck in naming your files.